over my shoulder is the Ukrainian flag flying here, and this is what used to be what is referred to as a palace of culture, effectively a bit like a town hall, but often they include theatres. And it's clearly been hammered in the fighting in Ukraine's invasion, and signs of that fighting are all around, not just here, but indeed in buildings further away as well. But what was really striking on the drive in here was actually how few buildings appeared to have been destroyed, how few homes on the road from Ukraine to Sudzha bore the scorch marks or the shell craters and the holes of conflict that we've seen in so many of the other towns. And that is really a reflection of the speed with which Ukraine invaded, and indeed the Russian soldiers fled. They were caught unprepared. Many of the people guarding the frontier were border guards and conscripts, not battle-hardened or particularly well-trained soldiers ready to face this kind of onslaught. There was more of a battle here in Sudzha, and the evidence of that is all around. There aren't many people. We haven't seen many people. I've seen one man on a bicycle as we drove in. Again, that isn't particularly unusual given the other sorts of towns that I've visited over the course of the last 2.5 years, towns that have been at the epicenter of the fighting. And the fear for many Ukrainians is that the relative tranquility that I'm experiencing right now here in Sudzha is not going to last. We know that the Ukrainian forces are beginning to dig in. Their rate of advance has slowed down significantly. Commanders say they are still taking ground, but the rate of advance has slowed down, and that is they're now digging in, preparing defensive positions, and they're expecting the Russians to try and hit back and to try and force them out of this Russian territory. And of course, this is a sore on the battlefield from Moscow's point of view, an embarrassment, a humiliation that Ukraine has managed to do this. Ukrainian soldiers here are quite keen to show that, for example, this shop, an optician's selling glasses, most of the glasses inside that shop are still on the racks. The computer is still at the sort of sales terminal, and showing that's the point they're trying to make, is that they haven't looted. Obviously it's impossible for us to see more than we're allowed to buy these Ukrainian soldiers at the moment, but that's part of what they're trying to impress upon us. And indeed they claim on the Russian population that they are different, they're behaving much better than the Russian soldiers. We just had a little request to run across a car park, and that was apparently because of concerns about Russian drones that may or may not be in the sky. And we've come into a building that is being used as, I suppose, some sort of shelter and civilian respite centre. The soldiers said they've got mostly old people and invalids here who potentially need help, unable to care for themselves. It's also where they appear to be distributing some sort of food and supplies. So Juliana, why did you come to this place?
Because it is the most safely place in Sudzha, but rackets are around this place.
More and more?
Yeah, more and more danger.
So we've come to another village in Kursk Oblast, which the Ukrainians have captured from Russia. They've asked us not to name it. They've put a few conditions on this trip, and that's one of them. The other ones are not showing any Ukrainian positions, any military layouts. Clearly they don't want to reveal the sort of disposition of their forces here. Here, though, in this village, what they wanted to show us is that they've brought a few bits of aid to a couple of old people living in this apartment building behind me. But actually what they wanted to do was to show them a video, a film of what happened in Ukraine over the last 2.5 years. And it's quite a weird exercise. There are two elderly people, an old man and an old woman, sitting on a bench watching a film showing Russian atrocities in Ukraine. But the fact that Ukraine feels it needs to do this while it holds this territory, to get that message through to ordinary Russians about what happened on its soil, in many ways in their name, is a reflection perhaps of the information chokehold that Russia has in many instances over ordinary people. They're not aware of what was going on. At least Ukraine feels they can't have been aware of what was going on just a few miles away on the other side of the border. And indeed, one of the things we've noticed from talking to people here on this visit to Sudzha and Kursk, that's under Ukrainian control, is that the Russians who have stayed behind, they really didn't think about the war that was happening just a few miles away. It wasn't part of their lives, it wasn't part of their concerns, even though literally just a few miles across that border, Russia has been unleashing hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, in fact, over the last 2.5 years, missiles and drones, killing countless tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians. From our recent trip to Russia, to Kursk province, there was a sort of sense we picked up from just the handful of people we were able to speak to, almost a sense of indifference, not just to global affairs, but to domestic affairs. A sense that their lives are what they are, that they're cut off from those decisions made in Moscow, and no real sort of sense of political engagement. Of course, I can't, speak for everyone or understand, really understand popular sentiment across Russia based on those handful of conversations. But that is what we picked up in Kursk.